I know that some people don't think that this even is a thing or that it even exists. Harmful sexual behaviour amongst children and teenagers. I was one of those people before I started doing this work. It wasn't something that I'd even ever thought about. Why would I have? Is the point. But now that I do this work and, people DM me, people tell me different situations that they've got going on with the children in their life at the children's school that their son or daughter goes to, I start to see this become a bigger and bigger thing. And I've seen a statistic saying that all sexual abuse or offending, a third of it is peer on peer, meaning child on child sexual abuse. Now, there are some definitions that we use these days. We don't call young people offenders. We say that they display harmful sexual behaviour. And I suppose there are many reasons why we do that. I don't want to get sidetracked on that for now. Maybe another podcast we can get into that. Now, what I'm going to do here is I've prepared a structure using AI tools, which I'm utilising now, which is helping me so much with tasks that before I couldn't do. And I put together this this idea for us to learn about harmful sexual behaviour amongst children and teenagers. For example, I heard at a primary school here in England that there was a young child who exposed himself to a couple of other children while they were getting changed ready for sports, and the school didn't really know what to do about this. Is that harmful? Is it just natural curiosity? Is the child being playful? Is that normal for that child's age? Or is it something for us to be concerned with and investigate? Now, with the school not really knowing where to go with that, I thought, well, we need to learn about this, and this is something that needs to be spoken about more. Again, a third of all situations are carried out by minors on minors, so we should get into this. So on the screen that I'm showing you here, we will do this like the last podcast that I released, where I reviewed an article which was from Australia saying that 1 in 6 men say that they're sexually attracted to children. The sample size was 1,945 men. It was a very interesting article that I did. I just reviewed it and spoke over it. That will do for us for now. I'm going to do something similar here. If you missed that podcast that I just mentioned, by the way, please go to the latest one that I reviewed. Lots to be said about that, including the way I interrogated the article. I think I missed many things and could have done that better, but I am, as you know, I am learning with each time I do this. So on the screen here, if you're watching along on YouTube, you can see this. If you are listening on your podcast app, don't worry, you can still follow along, no problem. You will see that I put together, using this AI tool, ChatGPT, a structure for today's podcast, and there are 5 main points that we're going to go through, and my aim is by the end of this, we understand so much more about something that's very prevalent in our society with our younger generations, including young children. So the 5 points are: point number 1, what is harmful sexual behaviour? Point number 2, the continuum of sexual behaviours, meaning what's normal, what's problematic, what's harmful. Point number 3, age-appropriate sexual behaviour amongst different age groups, going from your toddler ages up until your teenage ages. Point number 4, when to be concerned, what are red flags? And number 5, how to respond to harmful sexual behaviour, whether you're a parent or a professional. So this is going to be really interesting. I think we're going to learn so much. And again, by the end of this podcast, I want us to be really equipped. I know a lot of parents watch or listen along to this. You will be very interested in this. And if you're a professional, meaning a teacher, a social worker, etc., this is something you should know too. So let's get straight into it. Point number 1, what is harmful sexual behaviour? Now, the AI tool has given us a definition, and it says harmful sexual behaviour refers to sexual behaviours displayed by children or young people under 18 that are developmentally inappropriate, potentially harmful or abusive. So the first thing you think is, well, how do you even categorise that? We know that lots of teenagers are already sexually active, so where do they fall in this? And the prepubescent children, the 5-year-olds, the 9-year-olds, etc., where do they fall in this harmful sexual behaviour? Now, I believe the harmful sexual behaviour terminology is quite a new thing. I'm actually in contact with 2 experts in this field at the moment, trying to organise them coming onto this podcast, which I hope I can achieve for the next podcast. I aim to release one of these every 2 weeks, because this podcast will lay the foundations, and then the experts can come in and help us with deeper knowledge or correct anything that we kind of get wrong in this particular podcast. So the key characteristics of harmful sexual behaviour: developmentally inappropriate, not typical for the child's age or stage, potentially harmful, may cause emotional or physical harm, abusive, may involve coercion, manipulation or exploitation. So what the AI tool has given me is that it's given me 3 links to websites. Now, I asked it to focus on these 3 particular websites in particular because I know that they are reputable within this field. So we have the NSPCC, we have the Centre of Expertise on Child Sexual Abuse, and we have the Lucy Faithfull Foundation. 3 organisations that are doing great work. So what I'm going to do, because we can't just rely on the AI tool, because we shouldn't. So I'm going to quickly scan through these 3 websites, find the definition which I think we can relate to the most, and then I'm going to come back to you and read it through. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so that was actually really difficult to decide. All 3 websites gave great information. I'm actually going to link all the links that I have in the description in the show notes, so you can actually dive into them in your own time. But I think the one that I'm going to choose is from Lucy Faithfull Foundation. They do great work with youngsters, and here's what their definition says. Children and young people are most likely to be at risk of sexual abuse within their family and community. At least 1/3 of all sexual offences against children and young people in the UK are committed by other young children and young people. Harmful sexual behaviour is a term used to describe sexual actions that are outside what's safe for a young person's stage of development. So I think that's a really good summary and way for us to understand. We're not talking about like sexual abuse in the way that we would think of an adult on a child. We're just trying to distinguish what is not normal for that particular child's age, and then what is need for concern, and what do we need to investigate further. I believe that we don't call it sexual abuse when it's children on children, and we don't call them offenders either. We call them a young person displaying harmful sexual behaviour. Now that's very interesting, and a tangent that I could go down because I feel like we don't want to label a 13-year-old that offends against a 9-year-old as a sex offender for the rest of their life. That's not going to be very productive. But there's it's not an irony. It's not a double-edged sword. There's a conflict of interest there, isn't there? Because well, what about a 19-year-old? We call them a sex offender, which labels them for the rest of their lives, and they're still very young. So big discussions needed around these complications. Let me continue with this definition because it's really interesting. Harmful sexual behaviour, it includes actions that can harm either the child or young person themselves or another person. It is hard for us to think about children and young people sexually abusing other children and young people, and it isn't always easy to tell the difference between abusive and normal behaviours in children. So if you take that example that I used of the child flashing their genitalia in the changing rooms to other primary school children, I can't remember how old they were. I think they were 5 or 6 years old. Like, is that do we label that as abusive? My immediate reaction is no. Do we label that as normal? well, we need somebody to help us understand if that's normal, whether a child of 5 or 6 years old does become curious about their genitalia. They recognize that they've got something there and it's different to others and they want to show it, or maybe they're a bit of a playful character. I don't know. Children, in particular in younger age groups, may engage in such behaviour without knowing that it's wrong or abusive. That's why it can be more helpful to talk about harmful sexual behaviour rather than abuse. So there's that labelling and definition of it again. And it is just interesting. It's like, when does a child or young teenager become self-aware enough to understand their actions? Okay, there's a little bit more. I just want to continue with this writing from Lucy Faithfull Foundation because I think it's brilliant. Children can display harmful sexual behaviours at any age. However, harmful sexual behaviours are most commonly seen commencing from ages 11 to 13 upwards, coinciding with their stage of development into puberty and the introduction of increased sexual awareness and interests. That just makes absolute sense. That's why education in these schools, bringing people in like me who can talk to these students on a level about different aspects of how to behave in sexual situations, how somebody can be victimized, how offending can happen, is so useful. Like especially when they start going through stages of puberty and they become generally interested in this anyway. We need to support them going through this. Of course we do, because otherwise their natural curiosity with the available resources that they have, meaning the internet, they will find it anyway. And pornography is obviously the big one, but also the internet has brought these young people to older people like never before. So, you know, these younger people, they idolize YouTubers and gamers who are all in their 20s. I'm talking about one-nighters, the hookup culture, sexualized chat. They shouldn't, you know, that kind of content's too old for them really when they're 11 and 13, but they're exposed to it now. So we also need to come in from the other side and give them some actual formal education around this. And that is a message to the person that reported me last month. If you didn't see that on my social media, go check that out. But yeah. Children who are disabled may develop at different rates, of course. Depending on their nature of their disability, they can be more vulnerable to abuse. Children with learning disabilities, for example, may behave sexually in different ways and are out of step with their age. Yes, I understand. Particular care may be needed in educating such children to understand their sexual development and to ensure that they can communicate effectively about any worries they have. So it's not just children who have disabilities or learning disabilities. It's also different children develop at different ages. So this whole thing's very complex. It is important to recognise that while people from different backgrounds have different expectations about what is acceptable behaviour in children, sexual abuse happens across all races and cultures. So this actually, you know, this is the document that I decided to read. This is the website I decided to read. They still haven't got their language correct, have they? Because they're using the word abuse a lot, where at the start of the article, they said that we should be labelling it as harmful sexual behaviour. So somebody needs to rewrite this. Lucy Faithfull Foundation, just in case anybody from your organisation is watching. I know a lot of you support my work. Thank you. So yes, okay. So really useful to understand. Another thing that I want to put in there is the fact that we could say that culturally, also there will be different expectations, different conversations, whether that be different countries, different religions, different faiths, different social settings, different social communities, all treat this very differently, meaning that the children are open to different things, exposed to different things. Okay, so I think we've done a nice job there explaining, getting an insight or getting an entry into what is harmful sexual behaviour. So let's go to point number 2. This becomes really, really interesting. The continuum of sexual behaviours. So the purpose of this is it helps distinguish between normal, problematic and harmful behaviours amongst children and teenagers. And the continuum is this traffic light system. This is fantastic. So we have green, which is normal behaviour, curiosity, mutual exploration, age appropriate, easily redirected. We have amber, which is problematic, repeated despite adult intervention, not age typical, causes discomfort. And we have red, which is harmful, which is coercive, secretive, escalating, and involves a power imbalance. Right, now, we're all going to have so many questions. How is a child under 10 capable of a power imbalance? I think that's absolutely possible. Let's see how this continuum is kind of explained in a bit of a deeper level. We have 3 links that I'm going to read again and bring you the one that I think is useful and suitable. And again, I'm going to put all 3 links in the description below if you would like to read all of them. So please give me 1 second and I'll be back. Okay, so I just went through all 3 links, and actually the NSPCC website seems to have a series of videos that we could watch. They're all like 2 minutes each, which really explain what the green, the amber and the red is. So I think that's going to be a really good idea. So here is the first. And by the way, this is called the Hackett's Sexualized Behavior Continuum. So I'm guessing Hackett was the person that developed it. So let's watch some of these videos. I think these are going to be excellent. So we've got what are developmentally typical green behaviours amongst children and teenagers.
When we think about what children display as part of developmentally typical behaviours, it's really important that we understand that as part of healthy child development, they will also need to learn about their own bodies, other people's bodies, body boundaries, and lots of behaviours that children display that we might perceive as to be sort of sexual, actually can fall into the realm of completely sort of healthy, developmentally typical.
I think what we need to think about is that as adults, we can sometimes put an adult lens on sexual behaviour, and that can make us very concerned when we use the term sexual behaviours in reference to children and young people. What we need to think about is that children grow and develop and change. They are curious about their bodies, about how their bodies change, that some people have different bodies to them, and that's all part of growing up and developing. Developmentally typical behaviours or green behaviours can be typified by it's mutual, consensual between parties, it's curious, it's light-hearted, it might be something that they see as a bit funny. We're talking about children who are of a similar age, similar developmental stage, that they're similar stages of powers. There's not status that's held over one from the other, and that they're just curious.
When we're trying to understand developmentally typical behaviours that children might display, it's really important that we understand it in the context of a child's healthy development. So that might be children wanting to explore and understand their own bodies, wanting to understand what the rules are about body boundaries. And obviously, as children grow and develop, what's okay for a younger child might not be okay for an older child. It might be completely sort of healthy and developmentally typical for a 3-year-old to enjoy nudity or wanting to touch their own genitals. But as children get older, we wouldn't expect, a 9, 10-year-old to enjoy nudity in the same way. We would expect them to have more awareness about privacy and the rules about body boundaries.
With any sexual behaviour, what we need to think about is the context. So think about all those factors that we talked about before, about whether it's spontaneous, light-hearted, are there power differences, are they of similar developmental abilities? So you're looking for things that might be of concern. Is the behaviour something you would expect a child of that age to display? Something that, if it's a more adult behaviour, then that might be something you need to worry about. Sexual behaviour in general can be seen on a continuum from developmentally typical through to problematic and then to harmful. And it's important to consider behaviours within the context that they're set and then decide where you feel that it is on that continuum.
Okay, so that's a great video. And I think that it mainly focused on children, prepubescent children there, because it really focused on us understanding when a child is just being curious, when they're just being playful, when they're just having fun. For example, the 3-year-old that wants to explore nudity is just a normal for a child that age to be playful in that way. But a 9-year-old or 10-year-old that wants to explore nudity may be a raise for concern. And when children are interacting together, playing with their bodies, exploring their bodies, us adults don't need to come with a lens of everything is sexual. I think that's really important too. We don't all need to worry with everything that they possibly do that involves their body, someone else's body, as being sexual. Everything doesn't need to hit, we don't need to hit the panic button at all times. But in response to that, it's like we also shouldn't just brush everything under the carpet. We do need to keep a close eye on these children. But what I don't think that video did was explain anything about teenage ages when they're sexually active. It's so difficult then, isn't it? Because I was personally sexually active, well, what I believe to be a very early, like 12, 13 years old. That may be in response to what happened to me when I was younger. I was very confident in sexual situations. I yearned them. I developed into puberty very, very early. And so where would my boundaries be? Where would my age appropriate activity be? If I was getting with a girl in my year and she was of the same developmental levels, and we were engaging in sexual encounters, is that okay? But what happens if it was the girl's first time, but it wasn't my first time? Does that make it abusive? Like, I don't think there are any real hard, fast answers here. We're just trying to understand. So let's go to the next video, which is what are problematic amber behaviours? So we've been through the green. Let's check out what they're saying about the amber. Okay.
It's helpful when we're trying to define problematic sexual behaviour to think about all sexual behaviours on a continuum, from those that are developmentally typical to those that are harmful, and in the middle are the problematic sexual behaviours. In my experience, professionals find them a little bit harder to define. It's much easier to say whether a behaviour is developmentally typical or harmful, and that can lead to kind of a decrease in confidence around recognising those behaviours. It's also really important to think about the context that might be surrounding those behaviours so that we can understand them better, and that helps us determine where they sit on a continuum. So, for example, we have to think about whether the child has any additional needs, gender, age, power differences, the location. So it could be that the child is displaying a developmentally typical behaviour but in the wrong context. So, for example, a child touching their genitals but in the classroom. Actually, the behaviour is typical, the context is what is of concern there.
When we think about where a behaviour may sit on the continuum, if we think about something like touching private parts, say in the classroom, the first thing we think is that's not appropriate setting for someone to be touching their private parts. It might be that the teacher has a quiet word and just says, we don't do that here, and that's enough to stop a behaviour. So we can put that down to an isolated incident. However, if that behaviour continues and continues despite trying to distract them into other activities, that might be something where we have to start being concerned about, well, why is that child doing that behaviour? We also need to think about things like the impact on the other children around them, about maybe they're witnessing that behaviour and how that might make them feel. If they're doing it when they seem particularly anxious or fearful, some children can touch their private parts when they're feeling anxious. And again, this comes back to context being key at all points. And one behaviour can move up and down the continuum depending on the context within which it's set.
I think what can also be difficult is that there are less clear reporting mechanisms around problematic sexual behaviour. So generally speaking, in our legislation, policy and guidance, the threshold for reporting for external support is around harmful sexual behaviours and not necessarily around problematic sexual behaviours.
Okay, wow. Oh my goodness, it's like it just gets more complicated the more we dive into this, doesn't it? Because we've now got harmful sexual behaviours, we've got problematic sexual behaviours, and this example that they're using is actually a good one. I think it's a good one what they're using here, because the as they mentioned, the touching of private parts. Let's take two different ages. Let's take a 7-year-old. Is touching their private parts a normal thing? It depends in what way they're doing it. Are they just touching it? Are they just itching it? Are they just actually arousing it? Oh, I don't know. Regardless, in a classroom, it's wrong. In public, it's wrong. But what about a 14-year-old doing that too? Then we would know that it's more like it's more age appropriate for them to be touching their own genitals at 14 years old if they've been through the stages of puberty. But in a classroom, it's not suitable, of course. What I think needed a bit more kind of follow-up was where she said if the teacher was to notice that the child was doing that once, just to let them know that that's not something we do here and then leave it alone. I would say that still needs to be on the reporting system. Schools, I have learned that schools have these incredible electronic reporting systems whenever there's a concern. It would need to be flagged, because of course if another teacher sees that same young person doing that, they're always going to that other teacher is going to think, oh, this is the first time. But if it's reported on the system, then they know actually this isn't the first time, and then it needs to be dived into. Why is this happening? Is it just because the young person doesn't understand or have the maturity to think about what's suitable and what isn't, or is there something more behind it? But again, I think what we're learning is that we mustn't fall into this danger of just hitting the panic button at every moment, and looking at everything with a sexual lens, looking at everything with an adult lens, meaning thinking everything's sexual. Okay, let's go to the third one, which is harmful behaviours in the red zone. So we've been through the green, we've been through the amber, and now we're going to see the video for the red.
There are lots of academic or policy definitions of what harmful sexual behaviour is. But essentially, harmful sexual behaviours are behaviours that are displayed that are harmful both to the child or young person that displays the behaviour and any people impacted by that behaviour. So that might include children or adults directly impacted, but also witnesses and bystanders that might also be affected.
So harmful sexual behaviour can be exhibited in different ways. So you can have face-to-face behaviours, or what we call contact behaviours, and that's when one person harms another person directly. You can have behaviours that occur online, and we call them technology-assisted behaviours, or you can get behaviours that are a combination of both.
Harmful sexual behaviours are typified by a lack of consent. There might be force or coercion, although that might be quite subtle and hard to spot. There's typically power differences between children involved. Again, that might be obvious, like a sort of significant difference in age or developmental stage, but they might be more subtle power differences like status, that might not be obvious to people outside of that sort of peer group, for example.
They may also be typified by behaviours, and it might be not so much what the activity is. So for example, if a teenager was masturbating in their bedroom, you may think that's appropriate for their age and stage of development. However, if they then were doing that behaviour in a different context, so say for example they were doing that within school, that wouldn't be okay. It could be that it's to do with the frequency or duration of that behaviour. So if a young person was masturbating to the exclusion of other activities, or wouldn't stop when asked to, that would then again tip it into something that we would be concerned about.
Okay, more teenager conversation that was in the red, but when talking about masturbation, I felt anyway. Now, what I think could have been done here is I could have recorded this and focused, in fact, I'm going to say I should have, and I didn't know before I started because I didn't know anything about this, but I should have recorded an episode focusing on prepubescent ages, and then done an episode focusing on post-pubescent ages, because they are completely two different conversations, because they are completely two different age groups. I get a lot of kickback online when I talk about children and teenagers, when I talk about minors, underage children and underage teenagers. People are like, 15 is a child. Someone who's 15 is a child. Why are you calling them a teenager? You're misrepresenting them. They're all children. When they're under 18, they're all children. Well, the problem is when we think about children, we do think about prepubescent ages. So I do stand by my decision to split those age groups up when I talk about the different topics that I talk about on social media, on this YouTube channel, on this podcast. And I feel like here is another reinforcement of that decision by me. Because this really does need to be talked about in two different categories. Those that haven't been through puberty and those that have. And then we could dive a bit deeper. But for now, we'll continue. We started the record. We started putting this together. So let's continue with this. And we have now completed point number 2. So let's recap. We now understand what is harmful sexual behaviour amongst children and teenagers. We now understand that this person, Hackett, has put it on a continuum of sexual behaviours, and this is going to be really useful for schools and parents too, and professionals to understand or have a system where they could place these behaviours on using the green, amber and red traffic light system that's been generated here. And that will help us with understanding what action, if any, needs to be taken. Excellent. Right, we're really moving forward here. We have 3 more points to go through. The first is age. What is age appropriate sexual behaviour? Then number 4 is when we should be concerned. So that's about red flags. And number 5 is how to respond to harmful sexual behaviour. And that's in reference to parents and professionals. So if you're enjoying this, if you're finding this interesting, stick with this. We're going to keep going. I know this is actually going to end up being a bit of a longer record because we've been going for about half an hour already. But I believe this to be like absolutely crucial as a conversation. So let's start with, let's continue with point number 3. Age appropriate sexual behaviour. So the AI system has grouped it to 0 to 5, 6 to 9, 10 to 12. Unfortunately, it didn't give me 13 and above. I should have prompted it to do that. I'm not going to do that right now. Let's just continue here. So it says ages 0 to 5. The bullet point is curiosity about bodies, spontaneous touching, easily redirected, it reads more like this. Ages 0 to 5, curiosity about bodies, spontaneous touching, all of these actions are easily redirected by us adults. Ages 6 to 9, interested in relationships, questions about sex and reproduction, and role playing. Okay, now ages 10 to 12, awareness of sexual feelings, modesty, curiosity from peers and media. Okay, so you can see how the development happens through those age groups. So now we have another 3 websites, and again, I'll keep mentioning it. I will put these in the show notes below. I'm going to go into one of these articles because I want a bit more information about that. In particular, I want to know also what's age appropriate for 13 and above. It didn't give me that age group. So I'll just quickly read through these links and then I'll be back. 1 second. Okay, great. So I have chosen stopitnow.org, another great organisation doing fantastic work. And they have split the age groups into clear categories with bullet points. So I'm going to go through those with you now. And the opening paragraph, though, I'm just going to read that to you because this would cause some conflict in people's heads and would cause massive debate, actually. They have written, it can be hard to acknowledge that all of us, even children, are sexual beings, have sexual feelings, and are curious about sex and sexuality. Children's curiosity can lead to exploring their own and each other's body parts by looking and touching. They may peek when a family member in the bathroom or changing clothes, or try to listen outside of the bedroom. They may look at magazines, books, videos, and images on the internet. It can be hard to tell the difference between normal sexual behaviours and behaviours that are signs that a child may be developing a problem. Okay, I'll stop there. The reason why I wanted to read that was the bit at the start. It can be hard to acknowledge that all of us, even children, are sexual beings, have sexual feelings, and are curious about sex and sexuality. Now, again, there's so many tangents I could go off on, but let me just give some of my thoughts to this. Are children sexual beings? Are they? Surely not, at the very least, until they get into puberty. Do they have sexual feelings? Surely not until they get into puberty. Are they curious about sex and sexuality? Or is that because we live in such a hypersexualized society? Even the marketing of perfumes and the marketing of clothing and even the marketing of cars, for example, when you see the TV adverts, they have a sexual feeling to them. Everything's trying to look sexy, everything's trying to be sexy, because sex sells at the end of the day, and children just grow up in that world, and obviously the internet has amplified that. And so is their curiosity about sex and sexuality actually a natural thing for prepubescent children, or is it something that they have grown into due to the way we have set up this world? Very interesting. Anyway, we will continue with this article because they have grouped it up really nicely. So they have put it into preschool age. So again, just to remind you, we are concerned here with investigating age-appropriate sexual behaviour. What is appropriate at different ages? So 0 to 5. Will have questions expressing knowledge relating to difference in gender, private body parts, hygiene and toileting, pregnancy and birth. Will explore genitals and can experience pleasure, stimulation, showing and looking at private body parts. So some kind of curiosity between ages 0 and 5. Some kind of curiosity about what they've got going on between their legs and what other people have got going on between their legs too. What is uncommon is having knowledge of specific sexual acts or explicit sexual language, engaging in adult-like sexual contact with other children. Okay, so they're giving us a common thing and giving us an uncommon thing. We understand that. Now let's go to the next age group, which is 6 to 8. What's common amongst that age group? Will need knowledge and have questions about physical development, relationships, sexual behaviour, menstruation and pregnancy, personal values. Experiment with same age and same gender children, often during games and role playing. Self-stimulation in private is expected to continue. Now, when we say self-stimulation, I don't think we're expecting those under 8 years old to be fully masturbating. I believe what they mean by this is, it just feels nice to just hug your own body in some sense, so you're just watching the TV and your genitals, you're just tickling them. You're not masturbating in a sexual way, I don't believe. I think this website could be rewritten to be a lot better, but it's giving us enough here. So uncommon behaviours between 6 and 8 years old: adult-like sexual interactions, having knowledge about specific sexual acts, behaving sexually in a public place or through the use of a phone or internet technology. Okay, so they would all be uncommon for 6 to 8 years old. Okay, so let's now go to school age 9 to 12. So this is where some children start to go through puberty, in particular girls. I believe, I understand that they go through puberty earlier than boys. So they are saying hormonal changes and external influences such as peers, media and internet will increase sexual awareness, feelings and interest at the onset of puberty. So what's common amongst this age group, 9 to 12 years old? Will need the knowledge and have questions about sexual materials and information, relationships and sexual behaviour, using sexual words and discussing sexual acts and personal values, particularly with peers, increased experimentation with sexual behaviours and romantic relationships. Self-stimulation in private is expected to continue and evolve, I would add to that. What's uncommon? Regularly occurring adult-like sexual behaviour, behaving sexually in a public place. Okay. Right, final age group, adolescents, 13 to 16. This one's going to be interesting because I don't feel like we've really commented on that particular age group yet. So, we'll need information and have questions about decision making, social relationships and sexual customs, personal values and consequences of sexual behaviour. Self-stimulation in private is expected to continue. Typically, children with a uterus will begin menstruation, while those with testes will begin to produce sperm. Sexual experimentation between adolescents of the same age and gender is common. Voyeuristic, sorry, I don't know how to say that word, behaviours are common amongst that age group. First sexual intercourse will occur for approximately 1/3 of teens. So, between that age group, approximately 1/3 of them are now becoming sexually active. So that means we need to teach them what behaviours are correct and what are not. We need to be proactive about that and not be reactive to certain stimuli that are in their world, dragging them down the wrong path, right? We all agree with that. So we have been through some common and uncommon behaviours amongst those different age groups, and you can see how they develop with each increasing age. Okay, let's get back to our document, and we've got 2 more points to go through: when to be concerned and responding to harmful sexual behaviour. Okay, so point number 4 is when to be concerned. Now, this is going to be really useful for us all, professionals, parents, whatever area you come into this discussion, because we now have understood what harmful sexual behaviour is. We now understand the traffic light system and what identifies as something we should be concerned of or take action with, and we've also now understood the different common and uncommon behaviours amongst different age groups. So now, in response to all of that, we need action. We need an action plan. So when to be concerned, what the red flags to watch out for are. We have been through this already. Sexual knowledge far beyond age expectations, persistent, secretive or aggressive sexual behaviour, significant age gaps between involved children, repeated actions despite clear boundaries. Now, I'm going to quickly go through the 3 links again, pick out the one that I think is good for us to go to, and then I'll bring that and we'll chat through it together. 1 second. Okay, so the NSPCC website wins again, and it's got a reporting incidents tab here, and this is good for us to quickly go through. So, I have received DMs in the past where people have had concerns about certain behaviours or what children are talking about, teenagers too, and they're not too sure what to do about it. And I always direct people to the national organisations and ask them to ring the anonymous phone lines that have trained professionals behind them so that they can get the correct advice. But here we have 5 bullet points of different places where you can go if you're concerned with any of those red flags, or if you see any of those red flags amongst children and teenagers. The first one is follow your organisational child protection procedures. So of course, if you're within a school, that's lending itself to that. Follow the guidelines that you have at your organisation. But if you're a parent, what are you going to do about it? Because you're not part of an organisation then. You could, the second bullet point is report to the police as appropriate. Now, for example, if an allegation of rape, sexual assault or sexual offence is made, this should happen alongside a making of the referral to a children's social care following local authority guidelines. So there must be local authority guidelines, I'm guessing you could find on your council's website, possibly. Or what it's saying here, in my view, is that don't just call the police and it be an isolated call. Follow that up with the local authorities as well. The third bullet point, contact the NSPCC helpline. There's a phone number there, there's an email service there, and NSPCC have written, our child protection specialists will talk through your concerns with you and give you expert advice. The fourth point is contact the Report Abuse in Education helpline, which has a phone number, also an email. That is also an NSPCC run avenue. And the fifth one is contact your local child protection services. Their contact details will be found on the website for your local authority that your child lives in. So for me, I suppose if you are working within an organisation or it's at your job that you notice this with a child or teenager, follow the procedure. If there isn't a procedure there should be, and then maybe that's something you want to highlight, but also then you have these other bullet points to go down. Now, the police one feels like you would call that if it's a dangerous situation that's ongoing or it's an emergency. That's how it feels, or even as it mentions an allegation of rape or sexual assault has been made. The rest I feel like would be most people's go-to if there wasn't an immediate emergency right now. And that is by contacting the NSPCC, basically. And they will give you advice. They're trained professionals. I think that's a really good starting point for people. And all the information here is available on the screen or in the show notes. Okay, so we now come to the final point, which is responding to harmful sexual behaviour. We have been on such a journey here together today. I feel like this has been like an amazing life lesson for us all. What is harmful sexual behaviour? We're more educated on this. The traffic light system that will help you put certain behaviours on a continuum so we can understand if action is needed. The other point is what's appropriate for different age groups, when to be concerned, what the red flags are. And again, I'm just going to quickly read them. Sexual knowledge far beyond age expectations, persistent, secretive or aggressive sexual behaviour, significant age gaps between involved children, repeated actions despite clear boundaries. They are your main 5 red flags. Thank you, AI, for pulling those up. Now, the final thing is responding to harmful sexual behaviour. It has split this up between parents and professionals. Of course, we now know, we have the tools and we now know how to respond. This is very, very important. And the reason why it's very important, because it's so sensitive for the person on the receiving end of this. For example, that example that they used in the NSPCC videos that we went through, where the child was touching their private area in a classroom. Now, you don't want to go all guns blazing into that situation. For example, I believe you wouldn't want to highlight that in front of the whole class and completely make that child that's doing it feel like they're in an attack situation where everybody's looking at them. That's not going to be productive. That doesn't need to be assessed or addressed in that way. So we need to have the skill to know how to address each situation so that we do it sensitively, it's productive, and drives towards change. So the bullet points that ChatGPT has given me is for parents: stay calm. Encourage open dialogue. Seek support or referral. Now, for professionals, ensure staff training, of course. Follow safeguarding protocols. Involve multi-agency professionals when needed. It's not good enough to all the schools out there just to do online training for your staff with regards to safeguarding. First of all, it's just a click exercise where everybody's just guessing on the multiple choice and just trying to get through it for that particular year so they can tick that off on their list. This isn't a tick box exercise. You need a multi-agency approach. You need people like me coming in and talking about the reality of it. You need the police coming in and talking about how they deal with it. You need a social worker on the front line coming in and talking about how they deal with it. This is very, very important. Okay, so we've got 2 links here, which is some advice for parents and professionals. Let me quickly check them out and then I'll come back to you. We'll go through them. Stick with me. We're coming to the very end of this podcast, probably about another 5 minutes more. 1 sec. Okay, I'll be honest, those 2 websites weren't really bringing me what I wanted to. I wanted some more information on the bullet points we read out, but I suppose just to summarise, and I know we're nearly reaching the hour mark now, and I'm wanting to wrap this up. It is the stay calm, encourage open dialogue, seek support or referral, ensure staff training, follow safeguarding protocols, involve multi-agency professionals when needed for both parents and professionals, and That's unfortunate. We didn't get more information about that. Again, this AI tool is something I'm using now and is going to help me prep these podcasts. I think you'll agree, we've never done it like this before. I've just done everything off the cuff. I've pulled up an article, I've watched a video and just given my thoughts just off the top of my head. That's been useful over the years I've been running this podcast because it's really helped train my brain and fine-tune my brain to come up with what I want to say on the spot. But now we need to take it in a new direction. We need this to be more structured. We need this to be more backed by good reputable websites. Let's start educating ourselves on the technicals. Let's start getting these young people educated from us. Let's start educating ourselves so we can prepare the correct environment for these young people. Let's not hit the panic button every time something happens in a school or in a home or with our child round one of their friends' houses. Let's know how to assess that situation. Let's approach it calmly. Let's approach it with knowledge and let's come up with an action plan to get that situation sorted out in the way that it needs to be sorted out. We owe this to young people. We owe this to children. We need to be better at adults to create the best safe environment for them because they are primarily our concern. Their safety is what we're after. So I hope this was great for you. If you're still here, please hit those like buttons. Please leave those comments. Please help me kick this algorithm into gear. And if you're watching along on YouTube, hit the bell notification below because that will give you, and I learnt this recently by the way, that will show you or give you a notification every time I upload something new. I believe Spotify has the same, maybe the other podcast apps do as well. It's a bell, you hit it, and then every time I upload, it will send you a message because otherwise my podcasts and videos are just suppressed all the time due to what I talk about. These platforms are not spreading them. So thank you so much. We've hit the hour. I feel pretty exhausted. I feel pretty drained, but we learned a hell of a lot today. Thank you.